Okay, so Naomi Osaka has pulled out of the French Open after being fined for refusing to do press because it makes her anxious. In a statement from Naomi, she said she's recently suffered long bouts of depression and is taking some time to focus on her well-being. So it sparked debate about whether athletes should be allowed to avoid the media or if it's simply a part of their job. So, Julie, what are your thoughts about this?
Wow. Well, number one, when I heard it, I sent such prayers of empathy, because as an artist, I identify with what she's going through. There are times when your body wants to go, but your mind is just not there. And I think with her, recognizing that, yeah, she made $55 million. So people are like, oh, she's made all this money, but she also put in the sweat equity. And she was on the front line of social change last year. Remember all the masks that she put on, every match, carrying that energy, carrying the weight of the community, right? And so how soon we forget. How soon we forget. And so this one kind of broke my heart, because I don't think she's saying I'm never going to do press, but cut her some slack a little bit. Cut her a little bit of slack. Yeah.
It's interesting because Frenchie Jen on Twitter writes, sort of agreeing with you, but sort of saying something else. Here's the thing. It is part of the contract. This is not debatable. My problem here is the type of questions asked to athletes like her and Serena. The tournaments should be addressing these problems long ago with the media, but they haven't. Now you have a mess. And I think to your point there's a lot that she's carrying. She's only 23 years old. Like you said, Julie, she's been on the front lines of social justice and fights. And not only is she carrying the weight of the world when it comes to Black Lives Matter, she's Haitian Japanese. So she's got also all of the Asian culture and the Stop Asian Hate. I'm sure that is weighing heavily on her mind. Japan is going through stuff right now. We have something called the Olympics planning, but you've got a big push from people there saying it's too dangerous because they're in the midst of this massive third or fourth wave of coronavirus. In Haiti, if you're following the news, there's almost 100,000 kids who are on the verge of starvation. That is, all of this on a 23-year-old's mind. I can't imagine. I think she did the right thing by stepping away. She said, I don't want to be a distraction for the tournament. But we have to also keep in mind that she is a biracial person. She gets questions that are very different than, let's say, any of the other players, for sure. And so she's not just carrying social justice, the weight, the tournament. She's also said, I've been suffering from depression. And I think it's really significant to hear that because, Michael Landsberg, shout out to him, sick, not weak. She's not a weak person. She just knows what she needs to get herself together.
That's right. I just want to also just chime in and just quickly say, Lainey, just about the stigma in the Black community about even sharing that you're suffering from mental health. That in itself should be celebrated, that she put it out there audibly for the world to know, to give other people courage, So I want to celebrate her for that as well.
I think we have another message from Kimberly on Twitter. And Kimberly says 100% athletes should be able to skip it. The media are vultures. And if she needs to protect herself from all of it to perform at her best, that is her right. Kimberly, I appreciate that. And I think we can all agree now that Naomi made the best decision that was right for her. I don't know that I agree with the media are vultures. That is a generalization that is probably a little bit too broad. Certainly, different sports have different media cultures. And to your point, Mel, about the questions that are asked of Serena and Naomi, tennis media culture is quite white. And we've talked about the importance of representation in media. And so there's probably a gap there that certainly hasn't served Naomi. But in terms of sports media in general, in different sports, they are actually they're not all vultures. Shout out to Hazel May. Love you, girl. Doing a great job. There's one example of someone who's not a vulture. But also I remember last year, the NBA, after the George Floyd murder, the NBA, all the players and the coaches actually took the opportunity to use their media time and their time in front of the microphone to talk about Black Lives Matter, to talk about social justice issues. And the NBA media encouraged it. The NBA, the league encouraged it. So there are examples of positive sports media culture out there. The NBA has been leading the way in many respects. And I think other sports cultures need to follow suit.
I love that, Lainey, and I think you're totally right. But I think there are some instances, and this might be one of them, where you have a moment you sort of ask yourself, why are we doing this? And then the answer is always like, well, this is always the way it's been done. And maybe that's the same thing sort of with the press conferences, like where I wish all the questions were thoughtful, but sometimes a lot of the questions are like, how are you feeling right now? Or the questions are more about the reporter's own ego, you know what I mean? And there was a great piece in The Guardian by Jonathan Liu, who addresses print journalists, the ones who are calling her sort of an uppity princess right now. And and they're also sort of saying that what she's doing is setting a dangerous precedent. So he sort of went into what the dangerous precedent is. And yeah, in many countries around the world, there are journalists who are being killed for doing their job. But meanwhile, in Paris, he writes, tennis journalists are facing the prospect of having to construct an entire article from their own words. So one of these things is not like the other. You know what I mean? So maybe it's this issue of like, maybe we just need to re-examine the press conferences.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with everything you're saying here. I guess my brain just goes outside of the world of athletes and sports, and I think about, Lainey, you could probably relate to this. Just the idea of when you've shown up at Hollywood red carpets or junkets, and there are some notorious stars out there who, undoubtedly, probably some of them have been suffering from mental health, and yet, they're legendary in the sense of making things very challenging for people who are there with the best of intentions. And I know I, for myself, have gone back to hotel rooms in tears because I haven't been able to get what's also my job to get. So while I think I do think it's so important to continue to open up these conversations around mental health, I think there's a piece here where you don't want to also go into the road where, we get into a place where it's like, I can't answer questions from journalists at all because it's too hard to do. I don't know if we want that world either. We'll just leave it at there.